So I'm assuming that we are going to be partly on Berkeley time. So some people may come partway into what we're doing. Welcome everybody, welcome students, welcome panelists. I want to say thank you so much to the 9 panelists that we have with us today. Can everybody hear me? Am I loud enough? Okay, good. I'm so happy that we're finally having this event. It's required a lot of planning and preparation, and I hope that you all find it helpful. And beside me, I have my colleague Heidi Yu. She is a fellow counselor. She works with students in the College of L&S, and she's super awesome. Not just because she's helping me here now, but just because she's really an amazing colleague. So thank you very much, Heidi, for being here. Can't tell you how much I appreciate it. I owe you cookies at least. And so we have, as I said, 9 panelists. The way we're going to go today is we're going to start with introductions, just very quick introductions, just so you know who's here. Then I'm going to give a presentation, a basic presentation, an overview of principles for resume and LinkedIn, and with input from the panelists. And then we're going to shift into breakout rooms. And you guys, you students, have been pre-assigned to breakout rooms based on the survey that you completed. So you're going to wind up going to architecture if you chose architecture, planning, or landscape, depending on what you chose. We're going to spend about half an hour in those rooms, and each presenter is going to talk about what they look for in resumes and in LinkedIn, anything that they think is most important for you to know, their key points. They may have examples to share. And if at any point you have, are having some sort of an issue that you need to ask me or Heidi, you can come into the main room and we'll do our best to help you. But hopefully you'll be fine in those breakout rooms. We'll be giving a 5-minute warning towards the end of the breakout rooms, and then a 2-minute warning, and then we'll bring everybody back. And also let me mention that in the breakout rooms, you'll have a chance to ask your questions. So this is a chance for you to get more individualized attention, even though it's not really getting your resume reviewed. You can ask specific questions about your situation, and hopefully that will be applicable to other people as well. And then we'll come back to the main room and we'll see what questions are still outstanding. And you can ask other professionals, the ones you haven't visited with yet, if you have any specific questions. So that's basically how we're going to go today. And I would actually recommend that if you're comfortable, actually during this main part, you might want to, actually it doesn't really matter because I'm going to be presenting, so you're going to see what I'm presenting, but you could potentially turn off your camera, certainly stay mute for the time being, so that we will keep a focus on who the panelists are. It just enables you to follow the flow more readily. So if you want to turn your camera off, then we'll just be focused on the people who are speaking. But I'm not going to tell you what you must do. Okay, so let's get started. Let me just start off by introducing our panelists. Actually, I want to bring up my screen, and here we are. Can everybody see my screen? Great. Okay. Resumes and LinkedIn for CED, effective strategies and alumni employer Q&A. And that's today. So it's me and guests. And here's the agenda. So I'm going to introduce the guests. And just for the sake of saving time. So first of all, and this is not in particular order, from SOM, Skidmore, Owings & Merrill, we have Christina Lin, who's an associate, and Hong Lin Lee, who is a design professional. We have from IA Interior Architects, Christopher Tyndall, I'm not sure if I'm mispronouncing that, I apologize, Design Director, and Mailani Ventanilla, Associate and Senior Job Captain. From Marks Okubo and Associates, Gerard Lee, Vice President. From MBH Architects, Eric Wong, Recruiter. CMG Landscape Architecture, Julia Price, an Associate. Sophia Zander Design, Sophia Zander, who's a Principal Landscape Architect. and the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, MTC, Kruti Singha, who's the principal regional planner. So let's pretend we're clapping to welcome them. Please join me in appreciating our guests. I know I do. Okay, so I've already kind of gone over this agenda. Overview, breakout rooms, Q&A, Zoom main room, more discussion. So moving on, just focusing on resumes. So the idea with a resume is, of course, you have things that you want to talk about yourself, that you want to share about yourself, but it's really important to pay attention to what an employer is looking for. And you can look at a job description to find out. Sometimes job descriptions are limited, and that might mean that you're going to have to do some research, maybe reaching out to people, maybe doing some online research, looking on LinkedIn. You can look at job listings just to see what are the qualifications that employers are looking to fill. So what I mean by looking on LinkedIn is that you can see people who are working in a given job and see what their responsibilities are, what their accomplishments are, and that will help you think about, okay, what do I want to emphasize on my resume? Especially if you don't yet have a job description, but you have a general direction that you want to go into. And then you want to think about the key messages you want to convey. You don't want to make the employer work to find that information, to have to pour through your resume and pull out the nuggets of important information. You want to make it easy for them to see. So that means both visually making it easy to see, so the fonts and the spacing and use of bolding and caps and stuff like that. And then the content that you include, so that you can really convey effectively what you have to offer them. And the way to show your accomplishments or your impact, and you want to show your accomplishments and your impact and how you achieved what you achieved, the skills that you used. So in this case, it's not a job description. Sometimes people will come and meet with me and they have copied something from a job description and it reads very blandly, and it, like duties include or included blah, 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 or responsible for blah, blah, blah. So you want to use more impactful language, more specific language, and I'll be going into more detail about that. Alrighty, so I'm going to be focusing on the experience section of the resume. There are other sections as well. You can always, at the end or during the breakout rooms, you can ask questions of the particular panelists that you're with to ask about other sections. But we're going to focus on experience. And so this is where you're going to have jobs, internships, and activities, where you're going to describe what you did in those different situations. And one of the ways that we can think about presenting information about ourselves is by using what's called the STAR or CAR or PAR method or statements. So the situation or task that you're encountering or that you're undertaking, the context or problem that you're dealing with. The situation, task, or context or problem may or may not be really explicit in your resume. That actually is more likely to be something that you'll talk about in interviews, but it's something that you want to keep in mind or that you want to reveal to the extent that it's helpful for a prospective employer so that they can, know what the context is for the work that you're doing. And then the action and the results. Those are the two other parts that are really important. And it's important to use concrete language, not vague language. People sometimes will, at various levels of their career, certainly not just students, will sometimes use language that doesn't make it clear what they're saying. And sometimes it's because you don't really know what you contributed, or you're not sure how important it is. And so you want to really think about, what did I do? What difference did it make? Who did I do it with? And things like that. Okay, moving on. So I just wanted to give some examples of the situation, task, or context or problem that might be presenting itself. These are just examples, just to help you think about your experience. So there might be a type of design or planning project. You can see the list here. A manager might need assistance or support because, sometimes I often see resumes where somebody will say that they did certain things, but they don't necessarily say who it helped. And so that's something that we're going to be talking about later. So maybe details need to be figured out, documents need to be created or organized, or maybe designs need to be created, new ideas, maybe process needs to be improved or a problem solved. Oops. Okay. So that's sort of the general situation, kind of a, that's about situation. Okay, so now we're moving on to action. So you want to use action verbs. And this is where I want to say, you don't want to say responsible for whatever it is you did, because just because you're responsible doesn't mean that you actually did it. You just want to speak to what you did, be more direct, and use these verbs. And so these are, I mean, not all verbs, there are tons of verbs, but these are some of the examples of types of verbs that you might use. And if it's a past tense situation, if you've already done it, you want to write in the past tense. If you're currently at that job or internship, you use present tense. But there are exceptions to this as well. I mean, in terms of if you completed something but you're still at a job, you might do a combination. But mainly the focus is on using these action verbs and not using things like nouns in the sense of organization of materials. You would say organized materials. It's more direct. And you know, I'll be interested to hear if any of our panelists have any kinds of thoughts about this as we move along through here. So you're focusing on the actions, and then we're talking about the results or impact of what you did. And sometimes it's hard to think, to come up with the idea of, you know, what difference did it make what I did? But I encourage you to think through that, because that will help distinguish you from other people who have more general or brief descriptions of what they've done that don't really reveal how they made a difference in the organization. So you can see some examples here of saving time or money. If you have specific numbers, that can be helpful. If it's a very small amount, or if it's not really dramatic, you may not include numbers, but if it will help you, then it's a good idea. You may streamline a process. So these are kind of relating to those contexts that I was speaking to earlier. You created a solution to some problem, improve morale. So it can have to do with how you relate to people. It can be a qualitative kind of result or quantitative. So qualitative could be something that relates to improving morale or I'm trying to think of another one. Organizing things so that they're more accessible. And a quantitative thing would be more like saving money or time, or it could be, you know, you called 30 different employers for some purpose or professionals, you know, so that you have numbers that give you strength in terms of the results that you've had. And the impact is important, because if an employer sees on your resume that you made an impact, then it enables them to picture you in a future role. So they see what you've done, they see the full picture, they have a sense of the details enough that they can then imagine you in a new setting, in their setting. Okay. So other components you might want to include is talking about the how you accomplish something using various tools, whether they be technical tools or design or more data analysis kinds of tools or methods. An approach, speaking to, especially if you don't have numbers, you might speak to use adverbs or adjectives, and you see some examples here. And oftentimes talking about whether you've collaborated with somebody versus doing it independently. Those are good things to show. Many times companies are looking for teamwork. So if you can show that you can work with others, that's really important, but also it's important to be able to work independently. And as I said, include numbers when you have them. And so and then there's a last bullet that I can't see. I don't know if you can see it. Talk about who you worked with. So like if you worked with a design director, or you worked with a chief architect, or whoever is a manager or director, whatever it might be, then that shows that you're speaking to your ability to work with somebody at a certain level, right? If you talk about collaborating with fellow interns, maybe 3 other interns, then you are showing that you can work with other people on projects. Okay. So let me ask, first of all, do any of the panelists want to say anything about anything I've said to either reinforce what I've said or to disagree? because I'm welcome, you know, if you have different opinion about something, or not just opinion, but perspective that you'd like to share, I'd like to hear it.
Okay. Can I just add a little cherry on top of what you did?
Yes, please.
Because I think all of that's true. I would say an additional thing to give context to experience is what you learned
Mm-hmm.
with these experiences, because I think we're not hiring static people, we're hiring a projection of someone's growth.
Yeah.
And the way that happens best is people who take learning even from fairly simple tasks. May not be on the resume, but it should be something we think about, especially in an interview. But if we can get it on the resume, even better.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you. Yeah. And I have an example later that includes that. And especially as students, you're in learning mode, but you don't have to just be a student to learn. I mean, hopefully there's lifelong learning, and you can demonstrate that you're learning through time. Any other comments that anybody would like to share?
So one thing that I wanted to add here is, you know, for some of you, not all of you, but for some of you, you're going to have limited, you know, work experience. So, you know, I would start to think outside the box, right? Because you need to make an impact. You can also look at the things that you've done in school. I recently interviewed a UC Berkeley grad, and one of the things that she had done was she had implemented a design, right, for wastewater. No, it was a rainwater collection harvesting system on campus, and she actually had it implemented. So she had to go through the whole process at UC Berkeley. It was part of a studio. It was actually extremely impressive to us, even though it wasn't work related, because she had to take it from concept all the way to construction and actually commissioning the system. So, you know, there are things that you may be doing as part of school that would actually be really relevant to us. The fact that somebody could take it all the way through from concept all the way to project delivery and getting it to actually be approved through the UC system to us was extremely impressive. So, you know, when you start putting your resume together and say, if you got a couple of you know, internships, that's great. But, you know, try to leverage what you have done in school also, right? Try to leverage things that you may have done outside, even if it's not related to the built environment. You may have worked at Starbucks, right? But, you know, say if you started out as, you know, a barista, and then you work your way up to assistant, you know, store manager, right? Those are things that we want to know also, because it's impactful. It implies that, you know, one, you're ambitious, two, you have the capability to work yourself your way up, right? And also, even if you remain a cashier or a barista, there are skills that you learn there, right? In how to communicate with clients, how to deal with difficult clients and all that kind of stuff that are relevant to what we do. You know, if you did an internship and you know, a lot of people think, oh, you know, I didn't do anything, I was just building models. But say, you know, you were communicating or talking about those models with a client. Well, that's client communication. We want to know that too. So, you know, don't box yourself in. Try to expand it, right? You are trying to make an impact, as, you know, Dinora has pointed out, you know, this star concept, you know, making impact, right? Don't limit yourself, right? You know, like I said, think outside the box, expand, and try to look at your experience from the outside. Okay, don't look at it from your narrow viewpoint. Look at it from how somebody's going to see it from the outside, and you'll be surprised what you can do with each job experience that you have, even if it's not related to the built environment, right? So think outside the box.
Thank you very much for that. Yeah.
If I may add,
Yeah.
and just kind of going the other end of the spectrum, I think it would be really helpful, and I think Denora, you mentioned it earlier, is to be as specific about what your involvement is. You know, as a student, we don't expect you to have a lot of experience. We don't expect you to have a lengthy, you know, experience. So, you know, the more detailed description of what you've done, you know, you might think it's minor, But, you know, if you're, instead of talking about, I worked with so-and-so, you can say I worked with so-and-so during concept design, and I, you know, did 4 conceptual massing studies. I think as the more detailed you are, and sometimes, you know, some of the tidbits, you know, we're going through tons of resumes, and then those details might stick with us, right? And then those are the things like, hey, you know, this person did this and that. And I think that'll really help with your resume to kind of stand out a little bit, just because those pieces of information will, I think, help.
Yeah, I think that brings up another piece. You know, I totally agree, and that was a great point. That, you know, especially a junior person, we're not expecting you to have a lot of experience, and I think the last 2 panelists touched on that. But what that does hint at is something I think to be avoided is make sure what you're putting there, you're being honest. And it sounds basic, but it's one of the biggest pitfalls I see early job seekers try to do, is either fluff it out or overestimate their own experience. We're not expecting you to have a lot of experience. We're more looking about how you learn and how you perform. So be really clear about what you did, be honest, and then just focus on how that can project into a new role.
And you know, having the ability to work with others is really important. So if you can communicate that, right? You know, we work in teams. You know, when you're in college and you're in studio and you're burning, you know, the candle from both ends and working till the middle of the night, now that it's all yours, right? When you work in the field, you're working as a team. You're never ever by yourself, right? So being able to convey your ability to work with others is probably going to be really important. You're not going to be a diva right out of college. And if you are, you're not going to be in the field very long.
Thank you all for your great contributions. I mean, Gerard, what you're talking about, transferable skills, the importance of not putting down things that you've done that are not in the particular field. That is something that I often help students with, to help to identify what it is from your experience that's transferable. The ability to work with people, customer service, communication, planning, organizing. There are a lot of aspects of your experiences that can transcend context. So thank you for that. And the whole idea about specificity, very, you know, this is really, really helpful stuff. So I appreciate your adding it to what I'm talking about. Moving on. So this is just an example of how to say more. So like, let's say this is in a design context, but not architecture or per se. But, you know, you created a brochure, what you did, how did you do it? You using a design, why, what was the context, or what was the purpose to generate customer interest in the company's new line of fall clothing? And the result was that you got high praise. So you got noticed, and that's great. I mean, because I think many times people will work in roles where they may not get a lot of feedback. And if you actually get feedback, then that says something. And to be able to talk about that. So you can see that this has the situation built in, that you're creating a brochure, but how you approached it, what the purpose was, and what the result was. And you can also change this around where you put the impact first, where you generated customer interest by creating a brochure, using a design, etc. So you can, it's a good idea sometimes to start with the impact that you have. And you can add things like adjectives like, you know, colorful and eye-catching. It depends on, you know, as long as it contributes to the particular context that you're in, rather than elaborating for the sake of elaborating, but whatever might be helpful for the person on the other end looking at it. So these are just some examples. These are not perfect. These are ones that I have gotten from different places, but they can give you some ideas. The idea of collaborating with the design principal, for example, that's who you're working with. 5-star boutique hotel, gives you a sense of the hotel and the location, what the person developed and produced, the specific things they produced. The next bullet focusing, you know, talking about the cost, the square footage, that kind of a thing, I think gives a person, an employer, a good sense of the scope of the work that you're doing. And then I have some more examples. The idea of selected to be part of a small design team. The idea is that you were noticed again. And the site plan for an ultra high net worth private airport, maybe you're applying somewhere that has a similar kind of high net worth context, and you want to emphasize that. Depending on what you're applying for, you might use different language, or you might focus on different aspects of your experience. So that's why you don't want to have the same resume and, for that matter, cover letter for every job, because sometimes you want to have it reflect the particular opportunity that you're applying for. So it takes a lot of work, but it's worth it. And employers can tell when you just have a thing that you send out to a lot of people without really tailoring it. And so here's an example: learned about basic construction techniques and selecting building material palettes. So that speaks to what Christopher was saying. You can see the bottom, using reclaimed materials, incorporating, I can't actually see this, but sort of it speaks to the specifics of resourcefulness and what kinds of, how you approached it. That gives more substance than just saying, rather than just saying, create a scheme for a new sustainable office space. That's very, it's general, but then if you give more information, you have more of a context, you have more how you approached it. And the whole sustainability thing, obviously, if you want to work for an employer where sustainability is very important, then you want to say enough to make that stand out fully. And these are some other examples, just more the emphasis on the square footage. Here's an example also of 120 luxury apartments in accordance with ADA. So maybe if you're applying for something where ADA is important, that shows an area of knowledge that would be important, or an area of experience. And then, I know I have a lot of architecture examples, so I apologize to the planning people and the landscape architecture people. I think there's some overlap among these, different areas, but certainly between landscape and architecture, they're definitely distinct fields. But so you can see in this example, authored an analytic demographic report that boosted investor confidence. So there's a result by revealing healthier project area indicators. So, how it happened, what the result was, investigated and explained discrepancies. Those are good action verbs between consultant predictions and actual demographics, exposing a need to improve the tracking of resident demographic data to ensure smarter positioning for future. So you can see that there's a lot of context and understanding of how the work fits into the bigger picture, rather than just a list of a very brief list of what did this, did this, did this. It gives you a context. And sometimes it's easier or more difficult to come up with this stuff, but actually I think this also speaks to the importance when you're in a job or an internship, that you try to understand the context. And I imagine you would be doing this anyway, but that it's a good idea to take the opportunity to explore and ask people more about the context, so that you can see how what you're doing makes a difference. And you can ask, what is the purpose of this? You may know already, but to get it from the people you're working with, so that you can understand how you fit into the bigger picture. And you can see, here's an example of somebody receiving an award. So that's another example of the kind of thing that you can include. So hopefully that gives you a good number of examples to get a feeling for how to develop these bullet points.
Can I add to that?
Yes, sure.
Actually, looking at that resume, it actually looks pretty good to me. The work experience there. One of the things that I would talk about also is readability, right? This is fairly typical of a resume that we would see, right? So the thing here is you can play with fonts and you can play with bolding and italics, but when you do it, try to be consistent and try to be, think about it from the person who's reviewing the resumes, because they're going through a lot of resumes and you want your resume to pop out. Don't overthink it. Don't try to, graphically design the whole thing and try to make this, I see people put a whole bunch of stuff in there. It actually makes things really hard to read. And here, there's some good things here, right? But the overuse of bolding, within the content itself, takes away from some portions of the resume. But in all, it's actually a pretty impressive list of skills as well as achievements that this person has put in there. Obviously, this person has a lot more experience than you will have just graduating. But,
Sure.
yeah.
And you can also see that for NKS architects, the person has put architecture firms specializing in residential and commercial projects. That gives the context. You can put it there, or you can put it in the context of the writing, for architecture firms specializing in, et cetera, did this or that, whatever, so yeah, I appreciate what you're saying about the graphics, because I'm going to be showing some examples. Here's an example that I think is problematic in a number of ways. So there are no experience descriptions, just lists of things. And how does a person have any idea what you've done? Now, it's likely that you're going to include a portfolio or samples, but you need to be able to verbally express what you've done. And that can be challenging. Whether, if English isn't your first language, or if it is, it can be challenging. Just to, especially if you're used to working in a visual way. So that's why I'm here to help you. And also, it's good to look at examples to get help. And also skills here were represented graphically. I've done this program before and heard from employers that the thing with these little dots or with the little circles, that they aren't necessarily the most helpful. So I would love to hear from any of our panelists about how you prefer skills to be shared.
I was just going to say, I actually appreciate this sometimes.
Oh, okay.
But I think it's that what we're trying to get at is beyond just a binary, right? Yes or no.
Right.
What we want to understand is how well you know these tools.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that graphically here, the thing that bothers me more than presented graphically is how many are represented graphically.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that goes maybe to what you were talking about as far as tailoring it to the job. If you know that the main, skills or software that you'll be using are the prime ones, I would just focus on those and not focus so much on the others. But if there is a different way to show this, I think that's fine too. We're just really trying to understand, did you dabble with it once in Studio, or are you a really proficient user of these tools?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, if I can chime in, when I see a resume like this, the first thing that comes to me is, this is a recent graduate, right? So they're coming in for, an entry-level position. So, like, Christopher said, I don't mind the little dot things, right? But I think that's just a little bit too much, graphic stuff going on here.
Mm-hmm.
If they're going for like a junior designer position, I might actually consider it. What I'm more interested is when I look at the practice experience down there, and I see that this person has worked at Kengo Kuma, right? And I don't know the other firms on that, but the fact that this person has worked in Germany, Japan, China, stands out to me, right? Pops up to me. It may not, pop out to other people, but to me, it says that, okay, this person, isn't afraid of trying new things, going to different places, working in different places. So they bring a different kind of worldly experience, right? It's something that I would find interesting. But then the thing is, I'll be looking at it and thinking, he didn't elaborate much. This person didn't elaborate much on the experience. It looks interesting if they could have elaborated more. I mean, considering the fact that they've already worked at 3 design firms before they graduated, I want to know more there, right? It's enough to intrigue me that I may consider, but I tend to grade resumes in a way where, if I'm getting a whole bunch of good quality resumes, I start to rank them. While this one might catch my attention, but if somebody has a little bit more detail in the resume and I only have, say, like 1 position open, this one goes, it catches my attention, but it's not going to be at the top of my list, right? I'm going to be more focused on somebody who, say, has 2 internships, but elaborates a little bit more, because to me, that person knows how to communicate well to me, what they've done, and knows how to get my attention, right? This yeah, this one has some things that are appealing, but it is problematic, and I would think, you know, he should be going more for a graphic design position as opposed to a architectural position. But you know, that's just me.
Right. Yeah. So it's interesting to notice what stands out to you. So thanks for that perspective. I always, I always kind of waver about the skill representation because you have to present it some way. But I think it's helpful. Maybe if this person chose one way rather than many ways, having the circles as well as the dots as well as the circles or for the language. It's like, okay, how many different versions can I have?
I mean, yeah, it looks nice, but the thing is, you are a recent graduate. I'm not expecting you to be an expert, right? And so I want to know what you've done, what else you've done, right? I mean, if all it was just listing that they had done, they're familiar with Revit, Rhino, InDesign, Word, Excel, just putting a list on there, I'll be satisfied with that because I'm not expecting them to be an expert. And if you tell me you're an expert in Revit, I'll be like, really? In college, right? You're expert in Revit. So there's a danger, when you put all these dots down there and like I see, they have it all the way, fill up all the way to the right. And that implies that they are expert. And I'm like, really? How do you determine that you are expert in that software, right? So there's a danger when you do that, right? It's, but that's just me.
Well, I also think, if the person talked about in their descriptions about how they used Photoshop, for example, which they rank so highly, if they talked about the different ways they used it, then that would give it more credibility.
Yep.
And more information. Was there somebody else who also wanted to share something?
It's Lonnie. I was just gonna say that I like that it is like visually it's different, but at the same time there's so much content and it's bulleted that you need to be careful graphically how you're representing it because your eyes are automatically drawn to those graphical things, but then it detracts from all the practice experience that I see that could be really a plus to us. So I feel like the practice experience and the achievements should be more highlighted than that.
Agreed.
The graphic skills.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good. So this is just another example of highly graphical, but we don't, you don't want to have your age. This person says they're 24 years old. In the US, you wouldn't want to put this. You also wouldn't want to have a photo. And again, the lack of descriptions, even though, yes, the person's been in a variety of places, that's great. I say, if you have a portfolio, that's a great place to show your graphic stuff rather than all these different, ways of doing this. One thing that I've heard from employers is don't make a logo out of your initials. It's hokey. So, you get the idea. I know that does anybody who from landscape or planning want to say anything about anything we've talked about so far? Because we've heard mostly from, I think we've heard all from architecture people. Does anybody else want to chime in anything about what I've talked about?
Well, this is Kruti from MTC. I think, the general guidelines that you have set are pretty consistent, I think, across all professions. In terms of planning, what I like to see what planner or job hiring managers and planning professions like to see is this kind of your experience with the planning process, with community input, with more and more with kind of understanding equity, things like that. So it's more on the policy and the communications and kind of public engagement side, where we'd like to see the detail and how you've been involved in that. Yeah,
so in terms of, thank you for that. The principles that I outlined at the beginning in terms of the actions and the results, would you say that holds true in your experience, Kruti?
Yes, I agree, yeah.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure that I, let that be known in the larger group that in fact, I think that in the design arena, it's actually, or rather the non-design arena, if you will, the planning, it's more like a liberal arts kind of, or a kind of a resume, in that there really is a lot of more focus, or there's a lot of focus on the descriptions in a way that there isn't the complementary design aspect. So there's a lot that you have to be able to express verbally, rather than having to do all at once on a resume, giving a sense of your design. I'm not saying you shouldn't have good design skills to do planning, but it's not as emphasized as it would be for architecture or landscape, I imagine. Is that not the case? Would you agree with me?
I think at least, I think from architecture, it's almost the inverse is true.
Okay.
If you've spent a lot of time designing your resume, it makes me sad.
Okay.
I think the portfolio is where we want to see the design. So the resume is more, really informational and serves as that anchor, but not, we're not looking for every single design idea you've ever had to show up on your resume. That ends up with one like this, where visually it's very jumbled.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think of your resume as the method to convey your verbal and your written skills and clarity, and your design skills that should live with a portfolio. And then I want to add one more is your cover letter, and that's the place where you can kind of let your personality come out. So those are kind of the three pieces, the trifecta, that I think will complete the package.
Absolutely. Yeah. I took cover letters out of this just to focus on this and LinkedIn, but cover letters are very important. Although you'll hear from different employers about, oh, I don't even look at them. And others where they'll say, oh, it's extremely important. But I appreciate your point about how you have to verbally explain yourself and present yourself in a cover letter is very important. And it works with a resume. And then it all works together with a portfolio as well, right?
Agree.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
If say you're at a career fair, right, where there's a whole bunch of employers with booths and all that kind of stuff, then that resume, is the one that's going to catch their attention first, right? But if you're at home trying to reach out to 20 different firms that don't know you and you don't know them, then that cover letter is going to play a key part in getting people interested enough to take a look at your resume, right? And that resume is going to be what's going to get your foot in the door, because a lot of times people read through the resume first before they even look at the portfolio, or project examples, right? And if your resume doesn't resonate, they may never even bother to take the time to look through, your project examples that you may have sent along.
I'd argue the opposite, but that might just be coming from the design standpoint. I look at the portfolio first and only look at the resumes of people I'm interested in.
I think that's, it just says, we all have different approaches to things, and it means try to do your best to make everything good. Don't just blow off any given thing. I mean, because you don't know if somebody's going to look at your portfolio first, but obviously the portfolio is an important part for somebody in the design field. Obviously, it's going to be part of the package.
Currently, I'm on the owner side, but for the last 26 years, I was on the design side, right? Managing principal HMC Architects, and before that at Harley Ellis Devereaux, and I had my own firm for a while also. So coming from the design standpoint, also, I get it. The portfolio is important, but one of the things that I've learned over the years is that for student portfolios, a lot of it is very graphical in nature. Some of it looks really, really pretty, and then when you dig into it, there isn't as much substance, right? mean, and design is subjective, right? Everyone has a different approach to design, right? So you could talk to 20 different principals, and they will all have a very different approach in how and who they look for talent. So that's the good thing for all of you guys out there, is that just because you don't get in the door at one firm doesn't mean you won't get in at the 19 other firms, right? Because we all have different personalities and likes and dislikes and all that kind of stuff, right? But for me, the resume is important. Seeing that somebody has a bunch of internships, it means they've tried, right? They're going above and beyond the slew of 200 other students that are trying to catch my attention. And then, I'll look at the portfolio, right? But a lot of times, there may be some that will just pop because they're really great portfolios, but a lot of it to me tends to be, you can kind of tell that they're coming from a certain university because they all kind of look the same after a while. That's just the way it is, right? But that's just me.
So in the interest of time, I'm just going to move us along. I appreciate all your contributions, though. Thank you, everybody who's been speaking. This is very helpful. And it's helping clarify things for me. Let me see, where am I? Oh, okay. I'm going to very quickly talk about LinkedIn. I want to give students enough time to have with you in the breakout rooms. I'm going to make sure that they have the full time in the breakout rooms, and we may have a little less time to the end. But I think it's more important that they get their full time in the breakout rooms. But I just want to say some things about LinkedIn, since the program is about this as well. So the purpose of LinkedIn is to complement your resume. It's an opportunity to say a little bit more than what you have on your resume. You have more space. You can use the first person if you want. You can talk more about what you're like as a person, if you'd like to, your personality and what you care about, in a way that's more flexible than on your resume. So it's a place, there are plenty of people who don't have LinkedIn profiles, and there are people who really spend time on them. I usually, when I look at them, you can kind of tell when somebody is either very experienced, and so they're like, I just have this here because I need to have it here, but I'm not looking, versus somebody who's actively looking, who really has worked on their profile, versus some, so they're different. I think it's something that will distinguish you in the long run, especially if you are reaching out to people to network or do informational interviewing, and you're on LinkedIn and you have your brand out there essentially on LinkedIn. It's representing you. It's how you want to be seen. So if you have it filled out and developed, and it doesn't mean it has to be like, chock, full to the brim, just that you put some attention to it, then it will make a better impression. So there's a part that people often don't have, but which I think is the useful thing to have on LinkedIn. And again, this will distinguish you. And by the way, I'm going to be sending this out to everybody afterwards, so don't worry about taking notes. So I think of it in terms of I care about, I can, and I want. And so you can just talk about, that you are a junior or a senior or a freshman, whatever, in school, what you care about, what motivates you. I've found that employers really like to know about what your passions are, or what, like who you are as a person, not just what you've accomplished. This has to do with what you have accomplished, the skills and knowledge you have, your experience, and then what you want if you're actively looking. Sorry. The type of position or responsibilities you're seeking, or the organization or setting where you'd like to be. So these are the kinds of components that you can include. And these are also the same kinds of components you can use when you're doing networking. When you're reaching out to people to tell them about yourself, or you're at an event, these components are basic things to be able to talk about. And then you can feel more at ease when you're talking to employers or to other alumni. So this is an example that I put together, just as an example from Urban Studies, and you can read through it. So you can see at the beginning, they say where they're, they're a student at Cal, what they're studying, what they're interested in, what their experience is, that they volunteered for a year at different organizations and what they've learned through those, and what kinds of opportunities they're looking for. So it's not too complicated. And I think it gives people an idea of this person. So that's an example I wanted to share. These are actual people. You can see, online, but you can see there are other examples here where the person talks about they summarize who they are. You can see this person's an analyst and project manager with certain experience and what she's doing currently, what kinds of projects she's done. So this is the I can part. And then she talks about skills. This is another thing you can do. I don't want to focus a lot on this because I think if you look at these examples, it will help you think about it. Maybe because we're tight on time, but I just want to bring your attention to these approaches. This person doesn't have a photo, which I really encourage you to have a photo. It makes a big difference in terms of your accessibility. It gives people a feeling of who you are. A headshot is a good idea. And so that's what's missing. The person has included their skills. They talk about what their goal is. So like in some sense, their passion, what they're interested in. So you get an idea of the kinds of things that a person might talk about and what's important to them. And this is just basically an example of resume content transferred to LinkedIn. So if you have your resume, in a good place, you can put it on LinkedIn. I mean, I would tend to capitalize the first word of each of these things because that's, what I usually recommend. But so maybe that's like a design decision. But you can do it like this, or you can do a paragraph. You can make it more personal, or not personal, but kind of infuse it with more personality if you want a little bit. But I think mostly you want to get across what you've done. And this is another example. And the thing I wanted to point out with this person talks about 6 years of experience, led multiple residential design projects through these different processes, the different things that they've handled. So you can see that they're giving you a sense of all their experience. And this is somebody who's more experienced. And then here's also where she's talking about being bicultural with a strong connection to her Korean heritage. So that's something that you might bring in if it's important to you. Okay, so this is a link to customize your URL. A lot of times people will have numbers at the end of their URL on LinkedIn, and I recommend taking it off. And so if you click on this, there's a link here. You can figure out how to do that and it'll look better. So if you want help with these things, you can, we have the Career Readiness Workbook. There's a link here, and you can make an appointment with me and handshake. And now I'm going to, is there anything anybody is dying to say about LinkedIn right now, or would really like to think is an important point to make?
For me, I swear by LinkedIn. If you don't have a LinkedIn account, I think that's a big mistake on your part, even if you're just starting out in your career. I've only ever had to send out resumes twice in my entire career. One when I first graduated, and the second time during the Great Recession. Otherwise, I've almost always had to rely on references and my network, right? Never ever really had to send out a resume other than those 2 times in my life. And LinkedIn is a big part of it. I get, I'm at a different point in my career, but I get for a while there, almost every month, a couple of recruiters calling me up for different principal or managing principal positions. And, with the current slowdown, it's now once every 2 months. And, for each position I've had, I've almost always been interviewed by 2 firms at the same time, competing. So I strongly suggest that you use LinkedIn. And remember, LinkedIn is public, right? So anything you put on it, you better be able to back it up, right? So, you have to be ethical. You have, it's a way to expand on your resume, things that you can't, because of space constraints, you aren't able to put in your resume, but here you can really, show how you perform, right? So numbers, as you progress in your career, if you started at a firm that only had 13.5 million in revenue, construction, in a sector, and when you left it at 210 million or something like that, that's significant, right? And people jump all over that. The more information you put into LinkedIn, the more keywords it generates, right? So that, for recruiters who are looking, they're searching with keywords and they'll find you a lot faster when you have a lot more content, relevant content, right?
Okay, thank you. And so, now we're going to shift into the breakout rooms, and you guys can ask, you can say more about your specific perspectives, all you